Hello, Cleveland. Welcome back to another edition of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Jack McCurry, and joining me once again on the pod is Jack Duffin. Jack, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Every day we're edging closer to the season, so I'm excited. Cannot wait. We're nearly there. The first installment of me paying for NFL Game Pass came out today, so we're really, really close.
Yes, we are very close. Friday officially would start training camp. They're going to be live streaming, so that's going to be fun. Gonna get to watch some actual football. The last couple days over here in the States have been a little hectic, Jack. I know you've been following the story somewhat. College football isn't going to happen in the state of Ohio. The Mid-American Conference, which, Akron, Kent State, Toledo, Bowling Green, they suspended play. And then just yesterday, the Big Ten, along with the Pac-12, two of the Power Five conferences also postponed their fall sports. They're hoping for spring ball, but it just seems like the logistics behind that are very unlikely. Being that you're not, I don't know. First of all, do you guys watch college football over there in England? And what's your take on the situation based on what you've read about what's ongoing over here?
So there are people over here that watch it. I personally don't, because for me Saturday's about the other kind of football with a round ball. So I spend a lot of time watching non-league, Premier League. So yeah, I've racked up 100 live football games in a season. So yeah, I don't have time on Saturday for college. And so it's just not something I've really got into. And it's a lot harder to get, whereas the NFL is really easy. You can just pay for Game Pass and you can watch every game live, other than a couple. So it's so easy to get your hands on. Whereas college it's a lot tougher unless you've got sort of certain TV packages. You're just not going to get it. It's a weird feeling with this, because part of me is really excited that if Saturday nights I can get two NFL games in, I can watch even more NFL than I did the year before. So I'm always up for that. We might see some really, really productive changes for the Players Union. It's incredible to see the support literally across the board from everyone, whether you're in politics, whether you're in players, people in the NFL. There's a real chance they could get, maybe not all the way to a full union, but solid progress for player protection and a lot more work around them. So there's some really good news coming out there. Obviously, it'll have a massive impact on the funding of the rest of school and the rest of sports that brings in. So there is knock-on impacts if they get a union. Great for those playing football. Awful if you play another sport and football subsidises it. But it's just going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. And it's a lot tougher with much bigger squads. There's a lot else going on, and you can tell someone that's earning $1 million a year, or even like 600,000 at the base amount, go, you will not leave, and you will not do this, you will not do that, and they're probably going to listen to you because you can just cut them, and they lose all that money, and then another team will be like, no, we don't want them. Whereas if you're someone you're not going to the NFL and you're having the last year at college and you want to have fun, maybe going out is something you do actually enjoy doing, and you can't just take that away from people quite as easily. So it's a really, really tough one. I would love to see maybe it just slots straight onto the back of the season, delay the draft by a couple of months. It'll be tough, but I think it can work. And hopefully by the time January comes around, everything will be in a much better state.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, obviously the pandemic has really shaken everything up when it comes to sports in general, but more or less the collegiate sports, because obviously in the spring the March Madness basketball tournament got delayed. They had to change protocols for football because spring practices were getting ready to start actually when everything started shutting down, and now it's so weird because the Big Ten is the reason they shut down is I've seen anywhere from 10 to 15 of their players developed this myocarditis, which is a heart condition, and that's coming out now because of COVID. And, I've read more that you can get it with other viral infections like a cold or the flu, but they just don't know the long-term health implications with myocarditis related to COVID. So, but you have these other conferences, the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, they're content on going. And it's just a weird thing because you have different medical officials giving differing opinions. There's no one solid information database when it comes to COVID. Everybody's got a differing opinion. And I get it from both sides. I don't fault the conferences from postponing play because of the potential second wave that's supposed to come in the fall with the yearly flu season. But I also get the players. They feel safe right now. They're in a bubble, but then they're going to start traveling to games. So who knows what's going to happen. Plus, students are going to be coming back to campuses because the majority of colleges in America are having in-house classes. Like, it's going to be business as usual. So, I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I guess there's the fear of the unknown, and that's why these conferences made the decision. Obviously, there's a lot of anger right now, but at the end of the day, like the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, they can still cancel. They've pushed their starts to like the end of September, but in a week or in a couple of days, they can decide, hey, we've gotten this new information, we're going to shut down. I just think everybody's like disappointed because there's no college football, myself included, because I love college football. It's how I spend my Saturdays when I'm not working. But I get it from the health side. I get it from the money side because the college athletes feel like they deserve more. And I agree that they deserve more for as much money as these colleges make. You know, it's just a bad situation, and the pandemic's brought that part with the money and, you know, their safety and, like you mentioned, the potential players union. It's just bringing it all to the forefront just because of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, obviously, purely from a selfish NFL fan perspective. The big question's obviously got to be the draft and what's going to happen, because the last draft was impacted in a slight way because you lost sort of some of that workouts and bits, but in the grand scheme, it wasn't really impacted that much. What do you think sort of coming up next? A whole year ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to Todd McShay earlier this morning, and he talked about, he goes, the scouting for this is going to be a nightmare because already I think 6 of his projected top 10 picks, because he posted a way too early mock draft today. 6 of his top 10 picks aren't going to play fall. And that included, I think, 5 guys from the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Including Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields. And he used him as a prime example. Justin Fields is a projected top 5 pick right now, but he's only played 1 full year of college football. He said a year ago, Joe Burrow was a projected 5th-round pick for him. 2 years ago, Kyler Murray had played 1 series of college football, he said, and everybody thought he was going to go play baseball. And 3 years ago, Baker Mayfield was a projected 3rd-round pick for him. So what these guys can do in 1 season could make or shake their draft stock and their pro potential. So, you know, these scouts could, you know, bank on what Justin Fields, what they think he can be. And that's why right now he's a projected top 5 pick. But there's also the unknown just because of the limited amount of games he's played. And you think back to 2017, Mitchell Trubisky was the 2nd pick in the draft. He had only played, I think, 12 or 13 games. And here he has struggled somewhat in his NFL career. And that could play into a factor just because of his limited college experience.
Yeah, I think purely from the sort of Brown side, and obviously a massive fan of analytics and data, I think it's going to be really, really unusual this year for us because in the past, the Browns were able to make a massive play and benefit out of being one of the few teams that relies quite heavily on data. And if you saw, according to PFF, we drafted 3 of their top 32 players on their PFF big board. You had Delpit in there, you had Wills in there, and Elliott, the defensive tackle. Yeah, Elliott. So that was 3 in the different parts of the draft. We took them all out of the PFF top 32. So what I potentially fear in a way is that lots of these teams, the old school football guys, your Dave Gettlemans, that rely on tape and they watch 50% of a person's plays and then they're like, oh, this is the guy. Using more data The issue is if they're using more data, the edge that the Browns have when people can sit there and just watch tape and be very reliant on that is eked away. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts. Obviously, the key thing about data is the more information you get, the better projection you've got. So the data is going to be shaky as well. So that is going to be something that's lacking. But it's going to be really interesting just to see how it plays out. Obviously, if the NFL drafts slightly later, then that's going to feel like a lifetime between the Super Bowl and the draft. Because that's something I really look forward to. My draft coverage basically starts when the Browns are eliminated, kicks on after Super Bowl, and then it's done in 6 weeks. So it's going to feel a lot different this time.
The one hope would be that these guys that aren't able to play in the fall, they fall into the middle rounds where the Browns have extra draft picks, and hopefully we get some gems in the middle rounds. That would be the one positive.
The draft picks this year as well are going to be super important, more important than other years, purely because of the pandemic and the cut in the salary cap. Because if you can get a load of players that are costing 600, 700, 800,000, and you can get rid of a roster player that's costing 2-3 million instead, suddenly that's a lot of money you can go spend on a much better player, or you're using that to get under the salary cap and commitment. So I think lots of people are talking about our picks going to be less valuable this year because of the unpredictability. I think they're actually more likely to be more valuable this year because you're probably going to see a greater variation in grading. So someone that one team might have as, this guy's a 5th rounder, there could be another team going, no, we see him as a 2nd rounder. Whereas in the past, there's quite a lot of similarities between teams, especially in the top 100. And I think teams want more picks this year because they can't be sitting there going, we'll sign someone for 4 million instead, because that whole middle of the roster is getting gutted, especially if you're a couple of teams that are 70 million over the salary cap.
Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned the Eagles and the Saints, like they are in dire straits when it comes to the salary cap. So if they have draft picks, they better hold on to them because they're going to need them more than ever next season. Just before we started recording, the NFL released their first initial wave of the COVID test results, and they're very encouraging. They have tested 10,000 people among the 32 NFL teams, or nearly 10,000, and 170 of them were positives. When it comes to the players, 2,840 players were tested, only 53 positives, and that's 0.81% of the whole of the 109,000 tests that they have done through Tuesday. So it's very encouraging. It's under 1%. And Dr. Alan Stills, who's the medical director for the league, was quoted and said, "I'm not aware of anyone that has had severe illness up to this point." And that's very encouraging to hear so far, as we're only, I think, at least 2-3 weeks into training camps for all the teams. So a very positive statistic so far. And the league also announced that they are going to continue daily testing through September 5th. So that's through the entirety of training camp. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah, I think it's really, really positive. And you're expecting almost the worst of it at the start because obviously for however long since these guys were training together, they've all been in different locations doing different stuff. When you're told basically you're going to be in the facility every day, whether you're working out, whether you've got team meetings, whether you've got other stuff going on, and and not that these guys are having a summer holiday for the entire time the season ends, the season starts, but you're able and you're mixing with different people, whereas you almost become like a mini bubble because you're so often in work, or you're also on your guard of like, I can't meet someone because they might have had something, etc. Whereas you're going to be a lot more guarded around what happens now. So I think I'd expect those numbers to be down. If it's 0.81% of players, I think if we get numbers for the next 100,000 tests or however many it is, we'll be below 0.5% easily. So no, it's in a really, really good spot. And you've got Saints, you've got some teams that they've set up mini bubbles already where nearly everyone inside the organization that's at something like a training camp, they're going straight to the same hotel. every night. So they're able to just completely block it in and really, really protect them.
Yeah, as long as, people on the Saints aren't pulling what two members of the Cleveland Indians pulled over the weekend in Chicago, then the mini bubble seems to be working for them. And, you would think more teams are picking that up. Hopefully they are. It's just not being reported. But the results so far are looking good. You compare it to not necessarily MLB because they're still having problems even during the season, but once the NBA got into a bubble, they've had no positive tests. Major League Soccer over here in the States, they haven't had positive tests since they've been in the bubble. So the bubble works. It's a little more complicated with the NFL, but if teams can implement it now during training camp, that's going to make sure that there's no hiccups as they move towards the season. And, this can show, like, if you guys are smart and you do the right things, we can beat the virus and we can have a full season, no hiccups along the way.
Yeah, European football or soccer, there's no bubbles, there's no anything, and we've literally had no cases at all. You've had a couple of odd players have flagged it and then it's been dealt with, but you're talking across 50, 60 leagues. There's loads of sport going on. So it can even be the case without a bubble. It's just about those involved being sensible. And the fact is, if you're training and you're busy 5-6 days a week, you haven't got much time to do other stupid stuff. So the busier you keep these guys, the less likely they are to cause havoc.
One final NFL nugget before we get into the main reason why we're recording today. The NFL ruled on Tuesday night that workouts are now prohibited. They're allowed to happen. If they want to bring free agents in for visits or workouts, they have to have at least 2 negative COVID tests, and that they got to keep them away from the other members of the roster, and teams can bring in up to 8 people to work out per day. So this is actually good for the Browns because they have a whole defensive tackle right now with Andrew Billings opting out. They have Elliott, Ogunjobi, and Richardson, but they need a little depth there. There's some veteran free agents out there available at the moment. So if they want to bring the guy in, Mike Daniels obviously was probably the biggest name. He signed with the Bengals, but there's some other guys like Snacks Harrison, Marcel Darius, among others, that they could bring in for a visit, for a workout, and perhaps assign them to the roster as a nice solid depth piece.
Yeah, it's something that they definitely need to bring someone else in there. They've obviously picked up Stewart on waivers from Tampa Bay. Interestingly, he's a much better special teams player than anything in terms of a defensive back. So just looking at PFF last year, he'd have ranked as our 6th best special teamer. So that puts him in a really, really good spot to make the roster. And my guy I've always been banging the drum for him is Tavia Thomas. That spot's potentially at risk because if you're going, you can be the 5th, 6th cornerback on the roster. You can mainly do special teams, but he's got a better upside than Thomas, just in purely as a backup slot who he was overdrafted in the 2nd round, but even if he was going in the 3rd, 4th round, there's more of a projection for him to go and do stuff. And if he can make the roster as a special teamer, and then Woods has got a year, even 6 months, because there's no dead cap on him because he was claimed off waivers, we can just run him and see if it works out. So he can make the roster, and then you can decide what you want to do after that.
Yeah, that was another interesting pickup by the Browns. Another corner, because I feel like we're pretty good at corner, but adding Stewart, who, like you said, could be a potential role player on special teams, would definitely help. I had to make a funny today. I sent Jack a direct message earlier in the day. Josh Gordon is in Cleveland, and I know Jack has been pounding the table all year for the Browns to bring him in as a potential wide receiver 4, but I get the feeling that I don't think Josh is coming back to the Browns, as much as some people still love him, Jack included. I think he's in town probably to attend to some personal legal issues by chance. He had these issues in Cleveland last time he was here, but I feel like for him it's only Seattle or bust. But I don't know, crazier things have happened, Jack.
Hey, my view is if you're allowed to smoke weed, then you may as well let him play, because the fact that the CBA changed a lot of this stuff, it's like, what would was considered a problem in the past, because if you're getting tested, then you lose this player. Suddenly it's not a problem. And as well, I don't think he's coming back, but it's just been a running joke for the entire off-season, so you may as well keep it going. But it's the one that you could never rely on him to be a receiver 1, 2, and 3. And to be fair, if he's sorted and he's going, he pushes above Rashard Higgins, but you feel comfortable with Rashard Higgins as your wide receiver 3. But you're in that position of, even if, say we do sign him, if he then goes and gets busted out the league and suspended after week 2, you're not sitting there going, oh, our wide receiver group just fell through the floor, because you're never in a position. Any player with sort of a pass that lands in suspension, lands in anything, you can't sit there and go, that can be our number 1 or number 2. But if he's sat there and going, oh, it's our number 4, let's just play him as a wild card. If it all goes wrong, you're like, hey, we're over it, let's move on. And as well, that player then has to work their socks off, because he's not able to go, oh, yeah, if I do something wrong, it's okay. It's like, no, you're out the building. We don't really care. Goodbye. Good luck. So, hey, the upside's there. If the CBA is going to allow him to smoke weed, then happy days.
Yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if he re-signed with the Browns. But, I mean, just when I pulled up Instagram today and seeing that he was in Cleveland, I was like, oh, it's time for some trolling. I haven't done this in a while, but no one really picked up on it, so it's unfortunate. Jack, after like 3 weeks, we finally got the details to Myles Garrett's contract. Quite astonishing. Jason from Over the Cap broke it on his podcast, and now it's officially up on the site if anybody wants to go check it out. But Jack, you broke it down in a very good article that we posted on thedogland.com on Wednesday. Jack broke down Andrew Berry's first 3 big contract signings: the free agent signings of Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin, and the contract extension of Myles Garrett. And Jack wrote about what these deals can tell you about how the Browns are potentially going to offer out contracts in obviously the present, but also in the future. So, Jack, the floor is yours if you want to go ahead and talk about the article.
Yeah, so there's 2 big things that are pointed out across all 3 deals that really stuck out. The first one is all 3 of those players signed for slightly less than what we considered the market value. And when I say slightly less, we're talking $1 million a year probably for the first 2 guys in free agency, and Myles signed for about 1 to 2 less. So we're not talking a crazy amount of money, but if you're saving 3 to 5 million across those 3 guys each year, then that's a decent saving, because that's a good player you can bring in and add to that group. So if you're sat there going, oh, let's go spend another 4 or 5 million a year on someone else because we've signed this, and the question is, how do they get that? And we can't be like the Patriots, the Saints, and the Chiefs going, hey, come join us. We've got this rich history of proving you can win a ring in Cleveland, because that's not there. Might be in the future. Just at the moment, it's not something you can sell a free agent on. And so the main way they did it is by really giving super player-friendly deals. Slightly different too. So the Austin Hooper one and Conklin one was very, very similar. They create basically fake years on the end of the contract. And they're called void years, but what it will mean is Austin Hooper got a 4-year deal. His actual contract says 5. Conklin, it's a 3-year deal, but he actually got a 5-year deal as well. And that just means that the signing bonus, which is split across the first 5 years of the deal, is pushed into the later years. And the void years automatically void off, so the player's never going to play on them, but they're just there for salary cap purposes. And so Austin Hooper, if you wanted to cut him after the 3rd year or trade him, then you've still got $7.5 million of dead cap, and you're only saving 5.75. So it's very little at all. In terms of Conklin, you're looking at, after his 2nd year, $9 million in dead cap, $6 million in savings. So pretty much a 95% fully guaranteed deal for each of them 2 guys. It's not quite Kirk Cousins, which was 100% guaranteed, but there's no way you're going to cut either of those guys to save $6 million a year. It's like, it's not worth it. If you're going to have to pay them more than that to not be on your roster, you may as well keep them. So the advantage the players got is, hey, you get this big guarantee. And there's two questions that we've not got an answer from yet. And fingers crossed, been on to Fred Greetham to try ask that question. And thanks to Brent Sobleski for helping push it for me. But the question we want to ask Andrew Berry in the front office is, A, did you only do this because of the pandemic? Are you trying to push salary cap, buy now, pay later? Let's create as much space as possible and push that into the future because, hey, it's a realistic thing to do. The cap's going to be tight the next 2-3 years. So push it. Or is it by design? Did you go, actually, Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin might have better deals out there financially, but we're going to fully guarantee them a deal. So rather than maybe signing on a deal that Conklin gets 1 or 2 years, but then he can get cut after that, we're going, look, we're going to pay you all 3 years. Hooper, we're going to pay you all 4 years. Come and sign for us. And it's something I've spoke about before in the past. Would teams do it? Because it is more risk. Most free agents don't turn out to be good. But you're making a real commitment to this player going, hey, we want you for all 4 years. We want you for all 3 years. Come and sign for us. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play out. Fingers crossed both turn out to be great. And obviously as a fan, you want that. But you've got to be aware that most free agents, like most draft picks, don't turn out to be good. So if it starts going wrong and they turn out to be average players and you have to bring in another tight end or you have to extend Njoku because Hooper ends up playing worse than Njoku, you might end up paying that guy a lot of money to be a tight end too. You might have Conklin, who it just doesn't work out for, picks up a load of injuries, and you're paying him all this money to either sit on IR or be a backup. There's no way you can just say, hey, we're going to move on and go to something else. And so just on those two, it's like, does that bleed into other players? If every free agent that comes in and signs a multi-year deal goes, I want this fully guaranteed deal, or suddenly you get every starter comes up for renewal and goes, hey, the agent goes, well, Jack Conklin and Hooper got this. We want our fully guaranteed deal. So that's the two with those. What did you sort of make of them two? And then we'll jump onto Myles Garrett, which is slightly different contract and different structure.
Yeah, I mean, with the Conklin and Hooper deals, it's, we talked about this months ago when it came out. It makes sense that they wanted to get these guys, so they designed the contracts a specific way. The void years, like, I'm still kind of confused about it. I know Philly did it, and I know you compared Barry to Roseman in the article. So in 3 years, Conklin is going to be a free agent, even though he's still technically on the books. Is that where I'm getting it?
Yeah. So that's exactly. It's basically you see them as sofa deals and stuff. Buy now, pay later. But the advantage is there's no interest. It's not like it goes up and that sort of 15 million you've got to pay him isn't increasing. It's equally split across all the years. So it's one that the installments will just sit there and it pushes money into the future. And hey, the salary cap should always be higher in the future. We've got a one-off year next year, but it'll always keep going up. So the later you can pay for anything, happy days.
Yeah, because I remember Philly doing this with Nick Foles. And, I remember seeing, he's under contract for 5 years. But they were saying it was only, a 2-year deal or something like that. And I was just so confused by it. But now it's starting to make sense the more you explain it. With the Myles Garrett contract, it's very interesting how the first couple years, it's very team-friendly. And then once 2023 hits, which theoretically is, when these deals come off the books, Myles Garrett's cap number explodes from 12.9 million to 29.1. Theoretically, if the cap skyrockets like we hope, he's still in that J.J. Watt, Von Miller range in terms of cap percentage. So while on paper it looks like, whoa, his cap number is going to be 32.1 million. Well, if the salary cap goes up to 250 million or even bigger than we expect it to because of the TV deals, Myles Garrett's contract might look like a steal in 4 or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, so it was really, really interesting. So the only two big superstars people might say Christian McCaffrey is a superstar in fantasy. He's not a superstar in the NFL, I'm afraid. In terms of contracts, you've got Patrick Mahomes and Myles Garrett. They're the only ones really so far from 2017 that have got that deal. And it is still really, really rare. Even though we see it for a few players, most players will not get that contract extension after their third year if they were drafted in the first round. Most teams are going to wait till year 4 to extend. And we've got Patrick Mahomes is fourth year in the NFL and his 5th year in the NFL. Basically, all the numbers stayed the same, which was a big win for the Chiefs because it gives them a bit more time when they can go hard at it before they then have to start paying him the big bucks in 2022. Myles Garrett's deal was incredible, and it's one of them where you need to wait for the final numbers to understand why they did some of this crazy cap stuff that we'll get to. But his 2020 number this year, basically the same as it was. 2021 was actually $5 million less than it was set to be. So it's not a saving the Browns are making. We're just spending that and paying for that later in the future. And then you're expecting his 2022 number to be somewhere in the region of about 25 million. That's roughly where you're expecting it to be. It's actually 13 million, which is incredible how low that is. And that's going to be that low for one reason and one reason only, and that's the pandemic. They just want to push it later. And so he's still getting all the same money. It's just the fact that we're going, right, we're going to put it all in your last 4 years. You're going to give us one cheap year at the front. And it's why it's really tough when you see the initial numbers break to go, well, why did this happen? Because he's got something called a double option bonus. And an option bonus is effectively the same thing as a signing bonus, but you do it after the time they sign. So he gets his signing bonus when he signs now and the deal's done. And then that will split that money over the next 5 years. And then in 2021, he effectively gets a second signing bonus, which is his first option bonus, where he'll get that money and it's split over the following 5 years. And then in 2022, he gets a second option bonus, which is basically a third signing bonus, and it will split money from 2022 to 5 years in the future. The last time a double option bonus was used in the NFL in anyone's contract was Joe Flacco in 2013. So it's a really, really rare thing. And the reason why no one wants to touch it is because it gives the player loads of protection. And players then feel really secure. They know that they've got all these guarantees late in the deal. You're never going to trade or cut that guy because it's going to cost you too much money to do. So that's a lot of protection for him here. And the other big benefit that he got for making it a player-friendly deal is the fact that it was 5 years. So we look at everyone else similar, superstars on the D-line, Khalil Mack, Von Miller, Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt. They're the big names on there. All of them signed 6-year deals. Myles got a 5-year contract, and that means either the Browns are forced to extend him earlier, or he can go and test free agency and get that second massive payday. He'll be 31, 32, and he'll be in a really good position to cash in. So it's one that if they're going to extend him, they're probably going to do it after the 2025 season. He's got 1 year left. He can then go, hey, pay me, or I'm going to go test free agency. Maybe we go the tag route, but yeah, you probably wouldn't do it unless he's only got 1 year left in him and he's had some injuries or something. But it's one that when you see why did this happen, it's really easy to spot with that Myles Garrett deal, just because it's crazy that you would manage to get a player to agree to a 13 million number rather than a 25 million number. He's getting that money into his pocket, but it just doesn't appear as a cap number on the reporting. And his agent's just basically done it as a trade-off. Give us really, really, really favourable terms. We'll help you out with your salary cap. And to be fair, it makes no difference to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's getting that money paid into his bank account. It might split over 5 years, but all of that money's coming straight in that year when the option bonus is paid. So no, it's interesting to note. Obviously, it doesn't matter too much with a player like Myles Garrett. When you're the star player on a team or you're the star quarterback, you'll get a contract that other players won't get because you're expected to always play through that deal. Option bonuses, though, the one question, and it always will be there. I don't think Myles will ever get suspended again due to doing something like he did before. But that doubt is always going to be there, quite rightly, because, hey, you see a player do that, and that's not something you wake up the next day and go, oh, it never happened, move on. With an option bonus, if he if we pay him an option bonus and he does it in that year, we can then claim against that option bonus. If we give him the option bonus or the signing bonus and it's in the next year, even though it's counted on the cap over the next 5 years, you can't go back to the previous season and reclaim any of that money. So that is all out there and protected. There might be some extra language around it, but it puts him in a really, really good position. It's a great deal for both sides, I think. But it's just one of them. We probably won't get an idea. I usually say 2 to 3 years, and you should have a really, really good idea of how a front office structures deals. They might have had a really good plan. Andrew Berry said, when I'm a GM, I'm going to do contracts like this. And then the pandemic came along, and he just went, hey, here's my plan, throw it out the window. And we'll come back to it in 2 years' time. And that would be a very rational thing to do because it's unprecedented what the NFL's going through in terms of rebalancing the books and a massive reduction in the salary cap. We were expecting it to be at about 215 million next year, and it's now at 175. So if you woke up the next day and found out you had, like, what's that going to be, a 20% reduction in your spending for the next month or the next year ahead, you're going to have a little bit of a panic and working out what you're changing in your life. So that's going to be something that will impact teams, obviously, where so much money is already committed in guarantees, certain stuff. So no, it's just interesting to note these deals. We'll get a bigger flavour moving forward. Hopefully someone asks the question. If they ask the question and Andrew goes, hey, this was by design, this is the way we're going to do deals, want to pay for them in the future, let's focus on just adding talent relentlessly now, that might be something they do. We see the Eagles are willing to make lots of trades. So trades is something we're going to see the Browns making. Lots of the stuff Andrew Berry is doing is very much the Eagles model. Less so much the guardrails, as I pointed to in the article, but we'll see lots of Eagles things. And as I say in the piece next year, have a look at that Eagles roster. That middle tier is what is going to face the brunt of all the cuts because your rookies are all on set contracts. No point cutting them because they're already really cheap. Then you're going to have your star players. You're not getting rid of Carson Wentz. You're not getting rid of any of those top players to get through a year of the pandemic. You'll convert some money to signing bonus. The Browns are going to do Conklin in a year's time. I would happily bet money on that's going to be a deal where you'll take his base salary, put it into a signing bonus and move that money into the future. But if you go and look at the middle of that roster, any of those guys, in the past, I'd have said, that'd be a Vinny Curry this season. Unfortunately, he's the one that got away. Bit tearful over that. That is the sort of player that, I would say 2 to 3 players that are currently on the Eagles at the moment will be on the Browns next season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very great, very detailed article that Jack wrote. Everybody, please go check it out at thedogland.com or go on Twitter at Jack Duffin or at the Dogland. Jack does great work for us as always, and this was another excellent piece, very detailed. He breaks it all down, and he's very good at what he does. Jack, we actually got a little breaking news on the pod right before we get out. The Browns are going to bring in a offensive guard for a visit, Ronald Leary, formerly of the Cowboys and the Broncos. Ian Rappaport said that they're bringing him in on a visit with the hope of signing him. Leary is 31 years old. PFF graded him at 58.4 last year. So not the greatest, but he worked in Dallas with Bill Callahan, so he has that connection when Callahan was the offensive line coach. So there's a connection there. Could be a guy to push Wyatt Teller at the right guard position for sure.
To be fair, if we look back to PFF, that grade last year weren't good. The year before was okay, but the 5 years before that, really, really good. And I suppose it can be a weird one because he's not. It was last year he played 754 snaps, and the year before that it was only 383. But I think that looks like a really good signing because if he has got that potential to go back to any of those Dallas numbers, that they are really, really good. The first year in Denver was really, really good. He's only 31, so he's not too old at all. There was 3 really good games he played last year. It was just the rest of it wasn't very good. I would say that's a cracking. And to be fair, even last year, the offensive grade wasn't good, but the pass blocking was great. And you know my view, I'm not that worried about how we can run the ball. As long as we can protect Baker and Baker can sling it, then we're in a good spot. So I think he's exactly what you're looking for. He'll come in, he'll do a great job. And he's only there as a backup. He only needs to be there if someone gets injured. But he's traditionally a right guard, so don't be surprised if he runs poor old Wyatt Teller into a backup role. So one to keep an eye on. I think that's a really shrewd move. We've already signed a couple of guys that will probably fight to be on the practice squad. You need 4 guards because you've got to have a second line while you're doing training camp.
Definitely, but we have guys that can play guard and center. Evan Brown, who we picked up in free agency, Nick Harris, who we drafted. There's a lot of versatility on that offensive line. I heard Brent Sobolewski, I think he told Jake Burns this last week on a pod, the Browns have 3 guys on the starting offensive line that played left tackle in college and started, except the guy that we just took with the 10th overall pick because he was the right tackle. So it's the versatility we have along the offensive line is very good. If we get Leary, I remember how solid he was in Dallas on that offensive line. Went to Denver on a big money deal, had some injuries, but 31 years old, veteran. I mean, I'm sure he's played for winning teams in Dallas, so that always helps. If you have a guy that's had winning experience, could come in and help establish a winning culture. He's got a connection with Bill Callahan, so that's a solid move. So hopefully, bring this guy in, push Wyatt Teller. I mean, even if he has to come in and be a backup at this point, depth never hurts as long as you don't overpay.
No, it's one of, improve it, and it needs to be good because he could easily force Wyatt Teller out. Hey, who knows? Why not? If he's playing better, get him in there. And you can't afford to give Baker poor protection. We need to know this year if Baker's the guy, and if he's having to battle maybe a COVID outbreak, and you need that depth because you can lose any player any time this year. Who knows? We might lose Baker for 2 games. We might lose, and we've got to have players ready to step up. So it's going to be more important than ever. Whereas in the past, I forget who the coach was. He was basically asked why Peyton Manning's backups weren't practicing, and it was, we're effed if number 12 goes down. Well, actually, you need to be prepared for that. Yeah, it's only 2 weeks. You're not losing the whole season. But it's like you've got to be ready that anyone can step in, whether you're the quarterback, you're the running back, you're the left guard, you're the center, you're the defensive end, you're the safety. There's going to be lots and lots of cross-training because everyone's got to know everyone's role anyway, because you've got to know the other guy's in the right place. And if he's not in the right place, you might have to sort of adjust to cover him. This time, that guy could go out and you have to jump over. So the more guys, a player like Chris Hubbard that can pop up anywhere on the O-line. And to be fair, it was awful last year, but that's not his entire career, so don't beat him for that. It's one that, hey, I think Ron Leary, cracking signing, might turn out to be completely naff. Doesn't matter. We just need to have enough bodies. On mute.
Nate Ulrich of the Beacon Journal actually just reported that he's visiting today. So I would think if he's visiting today, they're going to probably do a physical, make sure he passes COVID tests, and you would think all signs would point to him signing within the next day or two. So
I think it'll be straight away. We've seen quite a few players, they pop up. Timmy Jernigan popped up with someone earlier today. He popped up with the Jaguars, expected to sign straight away. I think one of these teams, they're probably more committed because it's not the old days of you just bring someone in, work them out, send them on their way. You're having to prepare so much time, so much going on, that also if you start just bringing players in and sending them on their way, agents will be like, we're not sending anyone else your way. That's not a team we want to deal with. So you've already got to be sort of, I would say, 80% committed to bringing someone in. Obviously, if they come in and fail their physical, then that's on the player. But no, I think teams are pretty confident. If you see someone pop up for a visit, feel good that they're going to sign.
Unless it's Des Bryant, which seemed like a total PR stunt for Hard Knocks, but that's a whole nother story.
I wouldn't be like him to get involved in a Hard Knocks. I remember the funny one with John Dorsey.
Oh,
They
my
gave me
God.
analytics on the age. It's like, why is he not on the assist? Oh, he's 30.2. I don't think John Dorsey ever realised there was decimal points in ages.
Good old Dorsey. Um, with that, we're going to wrap this episode up. If you guys have any salary cap questions, analytics questions, definitely go follow Jack on Twitter. He's the go-to for that. Does great work for us at the Dogland. It's at Jack Duffin on Twitter. I am at Jack McCurry08 on Twitter. Check out thedogland.com. We're definitely going to start ramping stuff up here in the next couple days with them finally getting on the field this Friday. Expect the podcast to ramp up as well. So stay tuned for more episodes. Follow us on Spotify. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to. Leave us a review. It's much appreciated. And with that, as we get on out of here, until next time, go Browns.
Go Browns.